I'm super happy to be presenting you with the Tree of Happiness. This is called Mimosa to most people, Persian silk tree to some other people, and Albizia julibrissin is its botanical name, scientific name. So this is something I've been waiting a long time to film, and just year after year I say tomorrow, 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 and then the years have literally slipped by, and I haven't gotten a chance to film about Albizia julibrissin, mimosa. So I'm really excited today to do this. I get a lot of questions. I think this is a tree that a lot of people are interested in because of what it does, and in short, it's really good for stress and anxiety and depression and grief, things like that, and we can all agree that the world is rich in those things today. So people are looking for something easy, something effective, and something safe and abundant in some places that they can use, make themselves. A lot of people get it from my Etsy shop, that I have this usually year-round if I don't run out, and it's something that I use year-round as well. And so a little bit about this tree. It's not from here, it's an invasive, and it's an aggressive invasive. So some people, you say mimosa, and it strikes a chord in them, and they're like, "Rah!" You know, they have a beef with mimosa because it does take over aggressively. It's in the pea family, in that legume family. So it has those pea, looking like a spring pea little shoot. When after these flowers are pollinated, and in the fall it'll just get thousands of these little pea-looking seed pods, and those will drop to the ground, and the animals will scatter them, and this tree, you'll see, will just start taking over a whole area, much like kudzu did. But I mean, it doesn't take over square miles like kudzu does, but it does choke out the natives, and it chokes out both the trees and the plants. It grows along wood edges and tree, like the sides of interstates, the sides of roads, the edges of woods. We have a couple, like, just in our backyard growing on fence lines, or where a fence line was. And I think that might be because of birds, you know, drop them in those areas. You don't find them usually in hot, dry, open spaces too much. They do like a little bit of shade. Like this one is on our tree line. I'm actually filming from my roof right now. So this is cool. I'm kind of proud that I have a mimosa growing right above where we are building my herb shop. So it's kind of fitting if you think about it. I got this little shelter of mimosa telling me, don't stress out, don't be anxious. It's a good reminder, hovering right over my little herb shop here and on the roof. So so I don't suggest that you plant this plant. I know that if you don't have it, a lot of people say, hey Alicia, how can I propagate a mimosa? And I'll strongly encourage you to not propagate or plant a mimosa, just because it's actually illegal in some states because it is so invasive and will take over so many of our natives. So don't go planting one. If you already have one, if you see one kind of on the outskirts of town, on the back roads, go ahead and just go harvest those. The more flowers you pick, the less seed pods will be available to take over the world. So look at it that way. Go ahead and use your invasives, because then we'll have less invasives spreading around. And if we all use things like honeysuckle and mimosa, then maybe we could keep these things in check, if you look at it that way. So yeah, so don't propagate it. It's invasive. It grows in like the southeast region, and then in parts of California. It's a subtropical plant. So you're not going to really find this in the northern regions. You're not going to find this in the middle of the country too much, or where it's too dry in the southwest. I have heard that it's there sparsely, but it doesn't thrive like it does here. So a little bit about the plant. The tree here. I picked some of these flower heads straight off this tree behind me to show you kind of the different stages. So they always bloom in June, so it's almost comical. June 1st is almost always when I see my first mimosa flower bloom. And this year we had a hard frost pretty late, so depending on where you were, they were a little bit later. But this is a brand new bud coming out, little cluster. This is a more mature one, and then this is the mature flower head. So it looks like this little Dr. Seuss, Horton Here's a Who, poofy little pink silky flower. And the smell of these things is amazing. They're like this rich, nectary, sweet, tropical, fruity smell that when you smell it, you'll just fall in love. So that's the flower. Then we'll talk about uses in a second. But this is the leaf. And as you'll see, it's a leaf comprised of several leaflets. And they are double compound, which means here's the leaf, these are the leaflets. And each leaflet has more tiny, I don't even know what those are called, leaflet-its. Tiny leaflets? Don't judge. Okay, so anyways, double compound. So here's the leaf, just like a black walnut would do. So these are really neat. When it rains or after the sun goes down, these will close up really tight. Let's see, I might, oh. Okay, this one's starting to close. If you can see, these ones are closing up. You see this kind of fold up on each other? So at night or when they rain, they'll just snap shut like this. It's really neat. And then the third part I wanted to show you is the bark. The bark is gray and thin and has little kind of knobs on it in places. And I can show you real quick how to harvest that while we're talking about it. But so you're going to want to harvest the bark and you're going to want to harvest the flowers. And sometimes, more in American herbalism, the leaves are used, but traditionally, in Asia, in China mostly, the flowers are used and the bark is used. So the flowers don't dry well. As soon as they dry, they kind of lose their potency. And also, if you don't dry them and keep them in an extremely dry environment after that, they'll just mold again. So I just tend to use these fresh, straight into a tea or straight into a tincture, which is my preferred method. And the bark I'll cut in strips however you want to do it, however you want to store it. So if 1-inch pieces are better for you, if you want to go, you can dry these and use them throughout the year. For your medicine, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but right now just identifying this is important. I don't know of any lookalikes really. There's lots of types of mimosas. There's a mimosa that grows here in Tennessee, and it has these same flowers, but it doesn't get over like half a foot to a foot tall. So really you're not going to find like a tree this size with these flowers, with those leaves, that's a lookalike. You don't have to worry about that too much. And this I just picked up. I think this is called an eastern swallowtail butterfly, and this was just down there, and I saved it. This is one of our native butterflies to this area. I thought it was beautiful. So, I think he's swallowing gnats back there. It's not. He's swallowing it. We're in Tennessee in the summertime. The gnats just get horrendous. We can't hardly go outside without like a mosquito net over our face. So he's swallowing gnats back there for the sake of making the video. So this is how I would harvest the bark. Okay, you saw how easy that was. This just snapped off today, and so it's very fresh. But the bark is part of the medicine. So on these thicker, like 1/2 inch to 1 inch limbs, if you're trimming a tree or if you see your electric company trimming trees, take advantage of that and use these limbs to gather your bark. So as you see, there's an outer bark that's very just paper thin here, and you can remove that or you don't have to. Either way, it's not going to bother anything. That's just protecting the inner bark, and the inner bark is this green bark that you see here. So as with all trees, the inner bark is where the nutrients of the tree, the sap, runs through the inner bark. So that's why we often collect, if we're using inner bark for medicine, That's why we collect the inner bark. The outer bark can be very thick, say like an oak tree or a walnut tree can be very thick. To get to the inner bark, you need to get all that off, but on a mimosa tree, it's just paper thin. And again, you don't have to remove this, but you can. And this green inner bark is what you're after. And that is containing all the medicinal properties that we're after. So, if this was a thinner piece, I can show you kind of what I would do. I just get a knife like this, start a little spot, and just shave down like this. It's that, there it goes. It's that easy. So collect the bark that way. Collect the flowers. If you're going to be at a tree one time, and you're not going to get to go back, I suggest that you just break off the whole flower heads like this. But if this is a tree that you have access to several days in a row, like here at home, I'll collect just these mature ones, and I'll leave all these to bloom over the next several days, weeks, and even months, because this will bloom into like early fall. When it rains, these get wet, and they drop, and they do make a mess. A lot of people don't like mimosa because it can become a messy tree. But here on my roof, it's not bothering me. There back in the field, it's not bothering me. It's not like it's over my sidewalks or in my driveway or something like that. But a lot of people don't like mimosas in places where they can make a mess because of that. But just use these nice pink ones. Don't use the ones that are rotting from the ground. So now let me talk about the medicinal qualities of this a little bit more in depth. So I mentioned that it's good for depression, anxiety, grief, hyperactivity, things like that. This is a child-friendly herb. It's been used for thousands of years, and throughout history, children have used it. Children to adults, not just children. So I've used this for several years. I was once upon a time on prescription anxiety medication, and I was just overwhelmed. I was at my peak all the time, right? I was stuck in 6th gear, and even little things would set me off because I was already at my threshold for stress and anxiety. So any little thing was like a massive explosion, and I found it very hard to deal with that. So mimosa brought me from always being up here to kind of being able to cope with things down here, so that when stress did come my way, it wasn't an explosion, it was something that I could manage, It does the same thing with children. Even like my 1-year-old who's teething, if he just gets kind of, when they just kind of lose it sometimes when they're teething, and they're just yelling and they're restless and they can't rest, mimosa would be good all the way from that to, say, children who are having a really hard time focusing on school. So we homeschool our kids, and it's really easy to get distracted because they're all 4 together, Now we've got the baby in place, and then there's a 5-year-old who needs mama to help him read, and then one needs help all the time, and then one's just trying to do her own thing. So we have 4 different dynamics, and that can be distracting. So mimosa would help you kind of just shut out the outside noise and focus on something. Also, children with ADHD, hyperactivity, some forms of autism, mimosa has been used in those cases. It's just worth a try. It doesn't really have any side effects. It's the only contradiction is you wouldn't want to take it during pregnancy or labor. I thought, okay, this would be great for labor because it helps you kind of focus and takes that anxiety away, and I'm going to take it for my home birth, right? And then as I studied it, I did find out it's contradicted during pregnancy, because it does have some blood-moving qualities, which wouldn't be a big deal on a normal basis, but you don't want anything that could cause a potential hemorrhaging or anything like that during labor. But otherwise, it's considered very safe and has a very long history, and by long I mean thousands of years. So it is a pretty safe. But always, check with your professional healthcare provider, whoever that is. Always talk to them about that if you have any concerns. I'm not saying just free for all, take everything that's considered safe, because even chamomile is safe, and people can have an allergic reaction to that. So I would never just say it's good for everybody. Always be safe when you're using a new herb, for sure. But generally it is safe. So this is how I describe mimosa, like how it happens for me when I'm really stressed out. Say I get under pressure really quick. You know, we travel out of state. At a drop of a hat, they'll call. You say you have to be in Denver in 2 days. I've got 4 kids. I've got to round them up. I've got to think, okay, what's on my schedule? What do I have to cancel? What do I have to complete? What do I have to clean? What am I going to do with this stuff in the fridge? What do I need to do to be able to go and get somewhere across the country in 2 days? And that's very stressful, and that's just tons of pressure all at one time. And I don't function in that. I don't function under pressure. So what I do is I grab my mimosa, and I'll take like 2 dropperfuls, and then 15 minutes later I'll take 2 more dropperfuls, and you just feel like this, like when anxiety builds up in your chest and it squeezes, you know, back here, and it squeezes your shoulders up here, and you just feel all that like a knot of stress, and your stomach's kind of got butterflies, and you're not feeling too good. And you're going, oh my gosh, I'm under so much stress, I don't know even what to think or what to do. That's when mimosa comes into play. You start taking that, and you just start feeling like, oh, I can breathe all of a sudden, and then all this cluttery noise like is muted, and I just feel like it goes, and I'm able to focus on what I need to do. And then instead of going, I need to do everything, somehow I go, okay, now I see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that's the order I need to do it in, and I can function suddenly under pressure, and all of that like frantic chaos just kind of falls away. And that is, it's like made to order for my personality. I'm very high strung. I don't do well under pressure anyways. I like to have my thoughts organized. So it's really good for that. So the flowers are slightly different than the bark in nature. So as I was reading through like Chinese articles, and the Chinese articles are better than I'd say like American, because in China it's been used for thousands of years, and in America it's been used, I don't know when they started using it, but fairly, you know, in the last recent decades, I'd say. I don't even know when this plant was introduced to America. I'd have to look that up. But the Chinese describe the bark as being like grounding. So when you just feel like I said, scattered, it just kind of helps you go and focus for a minute and feel grounded. The flowers are more like uplifting in spirit. Like they just kind of lighten. Like when you feel like, they just kind of go, and then you just go, you know. So they make a really good medicine combined. So what I do is I use the bark. Sometimes I do use the leaf, but I've kind of gotten away from that just because traditionally it's not used. You can, or you don't have to use the leaf. So let's just talk like how I would do the bark. I would chop up the bark, either fresh or dried. I would put it in a mason jar, say about half full, 3/4 full, and I'd put it like 100 proof vodka or equivalent alcohol. You can use brandy, bourbon, something like that, to draw out those medicinal qualities from the bark. And I would leave the bark in the alcohol in the menstruum for about 4 to 6 weeks. You could go 8 weeks, that would be fine. But I don't do the flowers the same way. So if I were to put the flowers in with the bark and do that anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks, then the flowers, as delicate and light and airy and nectary as they are, they start to like decompose in the alcohol. So I like to do that again in 100 proof because they do contain water. So I do 100 proof vodka or some, again, brandy, bourbon, something, gives it a good flavor even. And only do those for like 10 to 14 days. And that sounds like, how are you going to do a tincture in 10 to 14 days? But they're so light that even within like, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, you can see the color leaching out of these beautiful pink blossoms and going in. So it's almost immediate. And again, if you leave the flowers in there too long, they start to decompose and your tincture comes out like cloudy and actually starts to taste kind of like moldy. So what I do is I do the bark in one jar and then I do the flowers in another jar. And then when the bark is ready in 4 to 6 weeks, then I add my strained tincture of the flowers to the bark. But you don't have to. You can keep them separate. You can, if you want to try what they're like separately, but I always combine mine. So I'll add the flowers to the bark and then just have one nice combined, well-rounded tincture. So yeah, the question I get a lot is, do I have to dry the flowers? No, I don't like to dry the flowers because again, they don't dry well. And if you forget and you dry them too long, then they just lose their potency. So always try to use them fresh. So like June to September, just be harvesting throughout that time, making your medicine. If you don't have access to these or you don't have time, I do have it available all the time on my Etsy shop. I'll put the link somewhere. The Artist and the Herbalist is our Facebook page. Hopefully you visited there. We have lots of videos like this that you can look at, and then always you can get to my store through there. But always try to make your own medicine. I think that's awesome if you can make your own and use it that way. It's also good for grief. If you've had a heavy loss, whether it be a death or just the loss of like maybe a company or something major happened in your life and you're grieving and you're mourning and you're walking through that process, which is an important process. Grief and mourning are an important process. You don't want to stifle that, but to help you walk through that, mimosa is really good because it just helps break that like desperation, that like really awful rut that you can start feeling where it just starts pulling you down. Mimosa can just kind of break that and help you walk through that process. So you can use both as teas if you're had any adverse effects to alcohol. You can simmer down the bark and always just steep the flowers. And if you don't have the flowers, you can always just go ahead and just use the bark. That will also be beneficial to you. So I think that covers it. If you guys have any questions, leave some comments. Always share my videos just because, I mean, it's good information to get out there. How to use invasives, how to make your own medicine, and I just like sharing information and then just learning from you guys back, The more people get involved, it's like community herbalism, and I really like the thought of that. So thanks for watching, as always. Be blessed.